My name is Sarah Mitchell. There are nights you remember because they change your life forever. For me, it was a freezing Thursday in late November. The wind rattled the old windows of my father's farmhouse, while icy rain hammered against the roof. Every room seemed darker than usual, filled with the kind of silence that makes you feel completely alone, even when the house is full of people. My husband, Daniel, sat in the worn leather recliner by the fireplace. He hadn't moved in nearly 3 hours. Our 6-month-old daughter, Lily, lay against his chest wrapped in a soft yellow blanket. Her tiny body trembled with fever despite the medication we'd given her only an hour earlier. Daniel gently rocked back and forth, whispering the same words over and over. "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here. Daddy's got you." His voice was calm, steady, comforting. But I knew him well enough to hear the fear hidden underneath every word. I stood beside the kitchen counter staring at the thermometer in my shaking hands. 104.2. My stomach dropped. Again. The fever hadn't broken. It was climbing. I looked toward the hallway where my father was watching television loud enough to shake the walls. Football. Always football. The commentators shouted. The crowd roared. My baby's weak cries couldn't compete. "Dad?" I called. No answer. I tried again. "Dad, Lily's fever is getting worse." He didn't even turn his head. Instead, he waved one hand in the air without taking his eyes off the television. "Kids get fevers." That was all he said. Just 4 words. As if my daughter wasn't struggling to breathe. As if nothing was happening. I swallowed the anger rising in my throat and walked farther down the hall. "Dad, please." He sighed dramatically before muting the television. "What now?" "I think we need help." "You've already got help." He nodded toward Daniel. "Your husband's holding her." I stared at him, unsure I'd heard him correctly. "Dad, what do you expect me to do?" I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I wasn't asking him to perform surgery. I wasn't asking for money. I wasn't asking him to solve the problem. I simply wanted my father to care. Instead, he picked up the remote and turned the volume even louder than before. Conversation over. When I walked back into the living room, Daniel looked up immediately. "How'd it go?" I forced a smile that fooled no one. "He says kids get fevers." Daniel nodded once. No criticism. No complaint. That was one of the reasons I'd fallen in love with him. He never tried to turn my family against me, even after everything they'd done. He simply adjusted Lily higher against his chest. Her tiny fingers barely moved. Her breathing sounded shallow. Every breath came with a heartbreaking little whimper. Daniel kissed the top of her damp forehead. "We're taking her to the hospital." "I know. We should have gone sooner." "I know. So why haven't we?" His question wasn't angry. It was exhausted. And honest. I looked toward the front window where sheets of freezing rain blurred everything outside. Our old sedan had refused to start twice already that afternoon. The battery was nearly dead. Daniel's truck was in the repair shop after someone ran a red light the week before. That left only one vehicle. My father's SUV. A nearly new Chevrolet Tahoe. Big. Reliable. Warm. Parked safely in the garage. I looked back at Daniel. "I'll ask again." He didn't stop me. He knew I needed to try. I found my father exactly where I'd left him. The football game was entering halftime. Perfect timing. "Dad." Without looking away from the screen, he sighed. "Sarah, can we borrow your SUV?" "No." The answer came so fast it almost sounded rehearsed. I blinked. "You didn't even hear why." "I don't have to." "Dad." I said no. "My baby has a 104-degree fever. So call an ambulance." I already did. "When are they coming?" They said because of the storm. I struggled to keep my voice steady. "They're backed up. They couldn't give us an exact time." He shrugged. "So wait." My hands curled into fists. "She can barely stay awake. That's what hospitals are for. We're trying to get there." He muted the television again, finally turning toward me. "I worked 40 years to pay for that SUV. I'm not handing it over every time one of you panics. Panic? Was that really what he thought this was? Dad, if you wreck it, you'll buy me another one? No, you can't. So the answer is no. I stood frozen, unable to understand how the man who taught me to ride a bicycle, who once carried me on his shoulders through county fairs, could look at his own granddaughter and choose a football game over helping her. Then I heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps. My younger brother, Kevin, walked downstairs carrying a bowl of popcorn. What did I miss? Dad chuckled. Your sister wants the Tahoe. Kevin laughed. For what? Lily's sick. He shrugged. Kids get sick. The exact same words. Word for word. Almost like they'd rehearsed them together. Kevin reached into the popcorn bowl. Besides, he looked at me with complete indifference. Dad promised I'd use it tomorrow. For what? My fishing trip. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Our daughter might need emergency treatment. He smiled. I'm sure she'll be fine. Then he walked past me toward the living room. My father unmuted the television. The crowd cheered. The game continued. My world stopped. When I returned to Daniel, he looked at my face for only a second before understanding everything. They said no. I nodded. For several long moments, neither of us spoke. Only Lily's weak breathing filled the room. Finally, Daniel stood, still holding our daughter. He grabbed his old winter coat with one hand. What are you doing? We're walking. I stared at him. The hospital is almost 5 miles. I know. In this weather? I know. You'll freeze. So will she if we stay here. There wasn't even a trace of hesitation in his voice. He wasn't trying to be dramatic. He was simply being a father. He zipped Lily inside his oversized coat so her tiny face rested against his chest where his body heat could keep her warm. Then he wrapped another blanket around both of them. I felt tears filling my eyes. Not because I was scared anymore, but because I suddenly realized something. The man I'd married wasn't just a good husband. He was the kind of father every child deserves. As Daniel reached for the front door, my father shouted from the hallway without turning around. Don't slam it. That was it. Not. Drive safe. Not. Call me when you get there. Not. How's the baby? Just. Don't slam it. Daniel paused with his hand on the doorknob. For the first time in 8 years, I saw anger flash across his face. Real anger. He slowly turned toward my father. I've spent years biting my tongue because Sarah loves you. The television volume lowered. I've respected your home. I've respected your rules. I've respected you. His voice stayed calm. But if anything happens to my daughter tonight, the room became completely silent. Daniel looked directly into my father's eyes. I'll never forgive what you chose to do. He opened the door. A blast of freezing wind swept through the house. Rain soaked the floor instantly. Without another word, my husband stepped into the storm carrying our sick baby against his heart. I followed him into the darkness, not knowing that before sunrise, everything I believed about my family would be shattered forever. The cold hit me like a wall the moment I stepped outside. Rain stung my face, carried sideways by the wind. Within seconds, my coat was soaked through. Daniel didn't seem to notice. His entire focus was on Lily. He kept one hand around her tiny back beneath his jacket while the other shielded her little face from the rain. Stay with me, sweetheart, he whispered. You hear, Daddy? I reached for his arm. We'll find help. He nodded without looking at me. We will. The gravel driveway had already turned into thick mud. Every step was harder than the last. Behind us, the lights of my father's farmhouse glowed warmly through the rain. The television was still on. I could even hear the faint roar of the crowd every time the wind shifted. My father and brother hadn't come outside. Not to stop us. Not to offer the keys. Not even to see if we made it to the road. They simply watched football while their granddaughter fought a fever. That realization hurt more than the freezing rain. After nearly 20 minutes of walking, Lily let out a weak cry. Then, silence. Daniel stopped walking. Sarah. His voice cracked. I don't like this. I hurried beside him. Lily's eyes were half closed. Her skin looked frighteningly pale. Daniel carefully touched her cheek. Baby? No response. He gently rubbed her tiny back. Lily? Nothing. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw panic in my husband's eyes. We need help now. He started running. Not fast. The muddy road made that impossible. But he pushed forward with every ounce of strength he had. I struggled to keep up. My lungs burned. The rain made it difficult to breathe. Every few seconds, Daniel looked down to make sure Lily was still breathing. Each glance terrified me. About half a mile later, headlights appeared behind us. Hope exploded inside me. Daniel stepped into the middle of the road, waving desperately. The pickup truck slowed. An elderly man rolled down his window. Everything all right? Daniel didn't waste a second. Our baby has a high fever. We're trying to get to County Memorial. The older man looked at Lily. His expression changed immediately. Get in. There wasn't a moment of hesitation. No questions. No excuses. Just kindness. The truck smelled faintly of coffee and fresh hay. The man turned the heater to full blast. My name's Walter. I'm Sarah. This is my husband Daniel. Walter smiled gently. Let's take care of that little angel. During the drive, Walter kept glancing into the rearview mirror. You folks live out here? I nodded. With my father. Walter was quiet for a moment. Couldn't he drive you? Neither Daniel nor I answered. Walter understood anyway. I see. There was disappointment in his voice. Not surprise. Just disappointment. 25 minutes later, the emergency entrance came into view. Daniel was already opening the truck door before Walter had completely stopped. He ran inside carrying Lily. Nurse. My daughter's burning up. Everything happened at once. Doctors. Nurses. Questions. Wheelchairs. Bright lights. Someone gently lifted Lily from Daniel's arms. She looked impossibly small on the hospital bed. A nurse checked her temperature. Then another. The room became noticeably more serious. One doctor looked at another. We need pediatrics now. Another nurse hurried away. I grabbed Daniel's hand. Neither of us spoke. We simply watched as strangers fought to help our daughter. The guilt hit me all at once. Why hadn't we left sooner? Why had I wasted precious time begging my father? Why had I believed, even for a moment, that he would choose family over convenience? Daniel squeezed my hand. This isn't your fault. I looked at him. I should have known. He shook his head. You wanted to believe your father loved his granddaughter. Tears rolled down my cheeks. I kept thinking. If I explained it better. If I asked differently. If I cried. He'd help. Daniel pulled me into his arms. You shouldn't have had to beg. An hour later, a pediatrician entered the waiting room. She introduced herself calmly. I'm Dr. Rebecca Lawson. Your daughter is stable. Both of us exhaled at the same time. But every parent's heart stops when a doctor says that word. She has a severe viral infection combined with dehydration. If you'd arrived much later. She paused carefully. The outcome could have been very different. I felt my knees weaken. Daniel caught me before I fell. The doctor's words echoed in my head. Much later. We almost lost her. Because someone didn't want to lend us a car. Daniel stepped outside to call his employer. I remained alone in the waiting room. After several minutes, my phone vibrated. Dad. I stared at the screen. For a second. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. Hello. His first question wasn't. How's Lily? It wasn't. Are you okay? Instead, he asked. So, did you get there? Yes. Good. Silence. Then, you two coming back tonight? I couldn't believe it. Dad. Lily almost died. He sighed. Doctors always exaggerate. They said if we'd been any later. They say that to everybody. I felt something inside me break. Completely. Not anger. Not sadness. Something deeper. The last piece of hope I still carried for my father simply disappeared. I realized I wasn't speaking to the man who raised me anymore. I was speaking to a stranger. I quietly answered, "We're not coming back." He sounded annoyed. "What do you mean?" "I mean exactly what I said. We're done." Before he could answer, I ended the call. I didn't know it yet, but that simple decision would begin a chain of events that would eventually expose decades of lies, greed, and betrayal. And my father and brother would soon discover that the quiet son-in-law they had underestimated for years had been keeping a secret of his own. Daniel found me sitting alone outside the pediatric intensive care unit. The coffee in my paper cup had gone cold. I hadn't taken a single sip. He sat beside me without saying a word. For a long moment, we simply watched nurses move up and down the hallway. Hospitals have a strange kind of silence. Machines beep. Phones ring. People whisper. Yet somehow everything feels painfully quiet. Daniel finally spoke. "She's going to be okay." I nodded, but the knot in my stomach refused to loosen. I almost trusted him again. Daniel looked at me. My dad. I really believed that when he saw Lily struggling, something inside him would change. He gently placed his hand over mine. "You wanted your father." "I know. I just didn't realize he stopped being 1 year ago." Around 3 in the morning, Dr. Lawson returned. This time she smiled. "A little princess is asking for her mommy." I was already standing before she finished the sentence. When I entered Lily's room, tears blurred my vision. Her fever had begun to fall. She looked exhausted, but she opened her tiny eyes the moment she heard my voice. I leaned over the bed and kissed her forehead. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. So sorry." Daniel stood on the other side of the bed, gently holding one of her tiny hands. For the first time all night, he cried. Not loud, not dramatically. Just silent tears running down the face of a man who had spent hours pretending to be strong. I wrapped my arms around him. "You saved her." He shook his head. "No, we saved her." The next morning, Walter returned to the hospital. The same elderly man who had picked us up in the storm. He carried a small stuffed rabbit for Lily. I figured every brave little girl deserves a friend. I hugged him before I could stop myself. "You saved our family." He smiled kindly. "No." I simply stopped. Those words stayed with me. He simply stopped. A complete stranger had shown us more compassion in 10 seconds than my own family had shown in years. Later that afternoon, Daniel's phone rang. It was his boss, Michael. "Take as much time as you need. We've already arranged paid emergency leave." Daniel thanked him. After hanging up, he looked confused. "I only started there 11 months ago." I smiled sadly. Funny, isn't it? Strangers keep treating us like family. Just before sunset, my phone buzzed again. Kevin. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered. "What?" His voice sounded irritated. "When are you coming back?" "I don't know. Dad's asking." "I don't care." There was a pause. "Look, can you stop acting like this?" I stared at the phone. "Acting like what?" "Like Dad tried to kill your kid." My entire body went cold. "You really don't understand what happened, do you? She got sick. That's life." "No, Kevin. We asked for help. You refused. We almost lost her." He laughed. "You always make everything dramatic." Click. He hung up. For the first time in my life, I didn't cry afterward. I simply blocked his number. 3 days later, Lily was discharged. Healthy enough to go home. The nurse smiled. "She's a fighter." Daniel kissed our daughter's forehead. "She gets that from her mom." I laughed through my tears. "No. She gets it from her dad." There was only one problem. We had nowhere to go. Neither of us wanted to return to my father's farmhouse. Not after what had happened. Walter solved that problem too. He insisted we stay in the small guest cottage behind his property until we found somewhere permanent. I've been living alone since my wife passed. It'll be nice hearing a baby laugh again. I couldn't believe someone like him still existed. That evening, while Daniel unpacked a few borrowed clothes, I opened social media for the first time in days. I nearly dropped my phone. My cousin Melissa had uploaded family barbecue photos, taken the very day Lily was fighting for her life. There was my father, laughing, holding a burger. Beside him stood Kevin, smiling. The caption read, "Perfect family weekend. Perfect family." I looked at the date, the timestamp. It was posted less than an hour after we arrived at the emergency room, while doctors were trying to save my daughter. They were grilling steaks. Something inside me finally changed forever. No more excuses. No more forgiveness. No more hoping they would become different people. I quietly looked at Daniel. "They're never going to hurt us again." He nodded once. "No, they won't." Neither of us realized it then. But within 2 weeks, a certified letter would arrive in the mail. A letter revealing a decades-old secret about my father's finances. A secret that explained why he cared more about his SUV than his own granddaughter. And once that truth came to light, my father and brother's carefully built world would begin collapsing piece by piece. The certified letter arrived on a gray Monday morning. I almost tossed it aside with the grocery flyers. The return address belonged to a law office in downtown Columbus. I frowned. "Daniel," I called from the kitchen. "Do you know any lawyer named Robert Gaines?" He looked up from assembling Lily's new crib. "No." "Why?" I held up the envelope. "It's addressed to me." Daniel walked over, wiping the sawdust from his hands. "Open it." Inside was a single letter and a business card. "Mrs. Sarah Mitchell. I have been trying to contact you for several weeks regarding matters involving your late grandmother, Eleanor Mitchell. There is information that directly affects you and cannot legally be shared over the phone. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience." I read it twice. Then a third time. "My grandmother?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I thought your father handled everything after she passed." So did I. The next morning, Walter insisted on watching Lily while Daniel and I drove into the city. The law office occupied the third floor of a century-old brick building. Everything inside felt quiet, orderly. Nothing like the chaos my family seemed to create wherever they went. A receptionist escorted us into a conference room. 5 minutes later, an older attorney entered carrying 2 thick folders. "Mrs. Mitchell?" I stood. "Yes." He shook my hand gently. "I'm Robert Gaines. Thank you for coming." After a few moments of polite conversation, his expression became serious. "I've represented your grandmother's estate for almost 15 years. My heart skipped. I thought everything was settled. He looked directly at me. It wasn't. He opened the first folder. "Your grandmother amended her will 8 months before she died." I frowned. My father told everyone she never changed it. Mr. Gaines quietly slid a document across the table. "There is her signature." Then another page. "And here are the witnesses." Everything looked official. Everything looked real. "So," I whispered. "What changed?" The lawyer folded his hands. "She left her original farmhouse to your father." I wasn't surprised. "But," he turned another page. "She also left you 40% ownership of the surrounding farmland." I stared at him. "I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong person." He smiled sadly. "I assure you, Mrs. Mitchell, I do not." My mind raced. The farmland? Dad always claimed he owned everything. Every acre. Every fence. Every barn. Every tree. He'd repeated it so many times that even I believed it. There must be a mistake. There isn't. He slid another document toward me. "Unfortunately, your father never informed you." I looked up. "What do you mean?" Legally, he was required to notify every beneficiary. Silence filled the room. Then he quietly added, "Our office mailed 3 certified notices over the years. They were all signed for. But you never responded." I felt my stomach twist. "I never received anything." Mr. Gaines nodded slowly. "We've begun to suspect that." Daniel leaned forward. Are you saying someone intercepted the letters? The attorney didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened another folder. We recently discovered something during a routine title review. He placed several copies of signatures on the table. One belonged to my father. One belonged to me. Except, I had never signed it. My blood ran cold. That's not my handwriting. No, it isn't. Daniel looked furious. What is this? Mr. Gaines answered carefully. Someone attempted to transfer Mrs. Sarah Mitchell's ownership interest without her knowledge. I couldn't breathe. My father. We cannot officially accuse anyone until the investigation concludes. But, he paused. The documents were filed from your father's address. Daniel slowly stood. For years, he'd stayed respectful, patient, calm. This time, I could see his jaw tighten. He refused to lend us his SUV while our daughter was dying. And all this time, he was stealing from his own daughter. The room fell silent. Mr. Gaines slid one final photograph across the table. An aerial image of the farmland. It stretched for hundreds of acres. Last month, a commercial developer offered nearly $9 million for this property. I looked at Daniel. Neither of us spoke. $9 million. Suddenly, everything made sense. Dad hadn't protected the property because it held family memories. He'd protected it because he believed it all belonged to him. And if I learned the truth, his fortune would disappear overnight. Outside the office, neither of us spoke until we reached the parking lot. Finally, Daniel broke the silence. He never wanted you to know. I shook my head. No. He wanted me to stay dependent. He nodded. And now he thinks you're still the same little girl who believes every word he says. I looked back at the law office. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of my father. I was angry. And anger, when guided by the truth, can become something far more powerful than fear. I turned to Daniel. They took enough from us. He squeezed my hand. So, what do we do now? I looked him in the eyes. We stop asking for what's ours. We make them answer for everything.